You're watching the Metaphysical Mentor podcast with Michael Philpott. And we are recording. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. This is going to be a stellar podcast. This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. And I think it's something that's really fascinating, and it's growing in research. And I think a lot of people are intrigued by it. And there's a lot of amazing research about this topic. And we're going to be talking about psychedelics today. And I have an amazing guest today, Dr. Pamela Kryskow. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So for those who are listening, Pam, just give us a little bit of background on your profession and what your doctorate is and everything else I was on.
All right. So I'm a medical doctor in British Columbia, primarily an expert specializing in chronic pain. I'm also work a lot in psychedelic assisted medicine. I'm at two universities, UBC as a clinical instructor and Vancouver Island University as adjunct professor. I'm the medical lead on the Roots to Thrive ketamine assisted therapy program and Roots to Thrive psilocybin assisted program. I'm a researcher. I've got a number of research protocols and projects in place with a number of teams, including the microdose.me study. I've got a number of protocols in place for psilocybin and analogs, MDMA and chronic pain, ketamine assisted therapy, and a few other I'm sure I'm missing. And other than that, I'm actually a human being too. And I love kayaking. I have an amazing garden. And I love being in the forest.
Yeah, I'm one of those two people right now. I love being in the forest. I'm living in the concrete jungle right now, and I do miss being outdoors and being in the forest and being surrounded by nature. It's I think nature therapy is a big thing. It's really, really huge. So I have to ask. So being a medical doctor, how did you get involved in this type of research in this field? Because it seems a little bit off the beaten path, I guess as I would call it, from traditional allopathic medicine.
Yeah, it was like many people. It was a windy path, as is a life that's interesting. I think not saying that it's interesting, but so my first degree was criminology. I did a criminology degree at SFU, and I thought I'd go into law. And so, of course, in the degree, we really had a firm understanding of where the criminalization of drugs was coming from. We knew that I didn't really know the science side of it at that time, but I knew that it was political, and that we knew that, Nixon's drive to have it at the UN for the UN Declaration on Drug Policy in 1971-72. We knew that history, we knew that incarceration rates were through the roof, due quite often to substance use, not to actual criminality, or criminality related to substance use. And so that was on an academic level. I was aware that these psychedelic medicines and methods of control and stuff like that from the government were political, and there. I'm not going down that the conspiracy line here. I'm just saying that it made sense. We already knew that. We knew that what was being done and how that lobbying was being done and how it was presented, and that there wasn't really any scientific evidence. Fast forward onto that, I decided not to go into law, and I instead ended up pursuing what I was doing in the summer, which was forestry firefighting. And then I went into city firefighting. So I was a city firefighter in the Lower Mainland for 8 years. And in that time, I had a heavy interest in the mental wellness of our team. Other firefighters, of course, there's a lot of tragic and traumatizing events that happen in emergency services and PTSD. And I, at that time, was on the critical incident stress team. So we would do debriefings and defusings after critical incidences, trying to mitigate burnout and PTSD. And so then that was there. And then I really realized that about that time too, that I wanted to go into medicine. So I finished up my science degree and got into medicine and transitioned from the fire department into medicine. And so there was these hanging threads there that were left kind of loose. And about, somewhere between 7 to 10 years ago, especially when Johns Hopkins started getting some traction with their psilocybin at end of life, progress with their clinical trials, John Hopkins and NYU, it started listening again and started following it. And at some point, realized that, that there was a merger coming in, that these things were going to come back together, that you could start to see that the momentum was likely going to happen. And people were starting to talk about it more openly. I was at a dinner with a number of colleagues, all physicians, and at that time I had just come back from Peru, from doing ayahuasca in Peru, where it's a legal medicine, and worked with 2 PhD therapists there, and had a great time. Had really great sessions. I came back renewed, reinvigorated. And I was telling my colleagues, they said, "Oh, well, you're in Peru. What were you doing?" And I said, "Well, I was down there doing ayahuasca." And, it was kind of the first time I said it aloud to my medical colleagues. And it turned out that all of them had also done ayahuasca. And then we laughed our heads off about how we had we essentially had silenced ourselves from speaking honestly about the personal sides of our lives. And so we started talking about it and just kept talking about it. And, one thing leads to another. I was I did a lot of training in ketamine assisted therapy. I had some great mentors and some great programs. And I was working in chronic pain, and realized, again, there's another intersection here, that, chronic pain in people is probably, give or take a few percentages in either way, 50% physical, and the other 50% is emotional. Like we're fully connected people, brain and body. And I wanted to bring the ketamine therapy into the chronic pain program, because I knew I could only get people so much better with their pain, but I wouldn't be able to get rid of their fibromyalgia pain if nobody had ever dealt with their rape or their trauma. And if we don't deal with the whole person, then pain is going to manifest in the body. And there's a lot more data around that now. There wasn't so much back then. And so one step, again, just mycelial threads hanging there just all started to coalesce and come together. And then we were able to, push the leading edge a little bit and bring psychedelics into an existing program called Roots to Thrive. That was a resiliency program for healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, doctors and nurses, that had been developed by Dr. Shannon Dames at Vancouver Island University. And we married the program. We knew that we could do better. We could get better outcomes with people facing trauma, PTSD, burnout. And so that's where we went. We did that. We've been publishing on our outcomes, and we've been able to add in a psilocybin arm as well to the program.
Wow. That's fantastic. I mean, that's such an amazing journey. And it's like everything that you were doing in your life actually brought you back to full circle to what you were doing. You have the background in criminology, so you had that idea of the difference between the sociological aspect of it and the criminalization of it, how that intersects. And then also being somebody who worked in, as a firefighter. So you had that experience there dealing with trauma and understanding that. Then your science background and being a doctor. And then it's interesting that your fellow physicians are, did a little conscious traveling themselves using ayahuasca themselves. Now, one of the things I was always interested in is there really a difference in different psychedelics, or let's say ayahuasca versus mushrooms? Do they do the same thing, or it's just based on potency? How does that work?
I'm definitely not an expert in that area. So take what I say as just my experience and knowing with the knowledge that I have. And of course, there's other people that would be much more knowledgeable about this than I am. I think what we'll find over time, and if we maybe hadn't had this 40-year hiatus of the war on drugs, we'd be a lot further along of knowing, at what point would you use which medicine for what reason. I think they all overlap. There's a lot of Venn diagrams that go. I think of, and again, this is based on some research and some personal and some experiential and anecdotal and case studies and stuff. Like medicines like ayahuasca, I think do very, very well for big transformations. And I know in South America, there's in fact some hospitals that use ayahuasca first and foremost for some, even metabolic diseases like diabetes, and for some people that have been sent home and said, you got stage 4 cancer, there's nothing more we can do. They go do ayahuasca and find their way back to health. So there's, you hear stuff like that. Then you have, mescaline type, the cactuses like peyote and San Pedro. And I think those are a lot lighter, maybe a bit more creative type substances. And then you have psilocybin, which is a mushroom. That can be used on multiple levels. I mean, before the war on drugs, it was being used successfully for alcoholism and depression, and probably a lot other substance uses, disorders. And it's great for deep trauma, for PTSD, and obviously end of life distress. And then you got LSD. I don't know that much about LSD. I can't really speak well on it. And then ketamine, which of course has been on the WHO's list of essential medications for a very long time, been around since the 60s. And, we use it for multiple reasons. We use it in the emergency for trauma. We use it in the OR for operations. And then it's got this wonderful benefit that it can also help for trauma and depression and OCD and anxiety. So I'm not really answering your question, because I think there's so many intersecting Venn diagrams of all these medicines. And I think, like, again, if we hadn't had this hiatus of 40 years, we might have a lot better understanding, like, oh yeah, you should do this first, and then you should do this. And I think we're starting to tease that out as we return to some knowledge. And I keep in mind, many of the psychedelics are also molecules. They're lab synthesized molecules. They weren't around. They're newish in the last 100 years or so. So.
Yeah, like I just find it so fascinating on the information too as well. I mean, like, yeah, we can go down different directions like this. I was just hoping to have a conversation and just get the information out there. There's a lot of misinformation. But there's also a lot of information that's starting to surface now about the different things. And I had watched the video on I forget where it was, but it was basically on using ketamine therapy for PTSD. And how effective it has been, especially they were talking about some soldiers who witnessed horrific, and seen horrific stuff during Afghanistan, and they come back and they just can't get their life back together. And the use of ketamine therapy. Now, for me, my understanding of ketamine therapy was more of a sedative, but it's also a hallucinogen too as well.
Well, it has a psychedelic range. It's a psychedelic-like medicine. And so it's all about dose on these sort of things. So at a very low dose, I could, if you came into the ER and needed stitches, I can give you a very low dose, and it'll help the pain, and it'll help you feel just light and won't be traumatizing. We can give you some nice sutures and you can go home. If you have a broken arm, like kids and stuff, I used ketamine in the ER all the time for kids, broken arms, and they're just like be screaming. You give them some ketamine and they're like in happy land, and you can fix their arm, and they're not traumatized, which is nice, right? They're not traumatized from being in the ER and all the noise and distractions. And then there's the psychedelic dose, which is higher than that. So somewhere around 1 milligram to 1.5 milligrams per kilo, approximately. Remember, it's not really a weight-based medication. It's more of a receptor-based medication. And then you've got quite a bit higher, which is what you'd want if you were getting an operation. We are completely out. You're anesthetized. You don't feel the pain, and you don't have any trauma from the procedure. So it's all about dose in that case. But its on-label use is as an anesthetic.
Okay.
Its off-label use it's on-label now for for Spravato, which went through the clinical trials to get the intranasal. But you can equally, for 1/10 the cost, you can get intranasal prescriptions of ketamine for that too. So the on-label uses, like the official use that it's gone through clinical trials for, is depression and as an anesthetic. But we get clinical evidence that shows that, it also helps for depression, and it can also help for anxiety, and it can also help for PTSD.
So how is that different than traditional pharmacology that they give you for depression, stuff like that? Was it an SSRI or something like that, or anything like that? How is that much more different? Are there less effects to it? Like, I know people who take the antidepressant medication, from my understanding, again, I'm not a doctor, but they can't usually get off it because it just creates more havoc in their system, because they basically had all this exogenous, serotonin or whatever the receptor sites are doing inside there, whatever it's going on. And it just causes them to crash even worse than what they were prior to being on the medication. So how is that anything different than the ketamine? How does that work?
Well, I would tease that apart a lot. I would think of any medication, especially like an antidepressant, think of it on the spectrum. And we don't really actually know exactly what the mechanism of action is of SSRIs. Like we have a theory. It was taught to us like it was a fact in medical school. And then we found out, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago that it was actually still a theory. So we have theories. And a lot of times we don't know exactly what the mechanism of action is, but we know it works. So as long as it's safe and it works, great. Not causing harm, good. That's what we want to do, right? Don't cause harm. Don't make people worse. But with the antidepressants, like some people respond very well. Like I'm not pro or con anything like that. I'm pro getting better. So for some
I
people,
agree with you on that. That's 100% what I like. Yeah.
So yeah, for some people, these pharmaceutical medications are life-saving. Like they change their life.
Yeah.
They can actually function. And so for those people, that's what you want. Like you want something that gets them to get their life back. And maybe they need to be on a medication for the rest of their life. And then there's pros and cons to the side effects of it. But then if the cons of not being on it are that you never get out of bed because you're so depressed, then maybe you want to take the medication and deal with some of the other lesser side effects. So life is a balancing act, right? All the time, you get in a car, you take a risk of getting in an accident, but it's worth the benefit of going to dinner with your friends. We do this all the time. And so it's the same with the SSRIs. It's risk and benefit ratios. And for some people, they don't work at all. And a lot of people are in the middle. And so
really? So it actually, sometimes it does work for people.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of people that they work for really well. The issue, the challenge is that is really important to know about clinical trials is that, when you do a clinical trial, you're going to get people that are super responders, non-responders, and a bunch of people in the middle. And if you get a bunch of people in the middle, like you have to put all the stats together and go, is this benefit beyond what we'd expect from placebo? Right? And so as long as it's a yes, then usually they'll get to market. Now, in all those people, remember, they're all like averaged. The super responders, like that's what we should tease out, like who really responds to this medication in a really great way. Because there are people that really respond really well. So that's some of the advanced medicine we should be moving into, like who are the super responders, and then the rest of them don't take the SSRI because it's not going to work for you. Maybe you need an SNRI, or maybe you really just need to get to the seed of your trauma, which is where a psychedelic comes in. So I think of it differently that way. So if your amygdala is screaming at you like run, 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 danger, danger, like there's no SSRI that's going to ever be able to compete as well, at least at this time, with a psychedelic that can say to the amygdala, hush, it's okay. You're not in the car accident anymore. You are safe right now, and give you that bigger space to be in, that non-ordinary state to let everything stand down. Right. So that's what you're talking about with the ketamine, like with people that have come back in the military, right? They're in these heightened states. Their life is on the line all the time. They don't know if that person is good or bad. Is that person going to, throw something at them that's going to explode them or not? Or is it just a kid running up to say hi? Like they're always in this. And so you got to get that down so that they can come back.
State.
Yeah,
that's super hypoarousal, right? Now, I've also been a big fan of EMDR. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah. It's a great technique. People do so well with that.
Yeah, I found it fascinating too. Myself, I've used EMDR for my own personal issues and stuff like that. And I found it basically it's really helped me and basically almost saved my life. Basically, really kind of got me out of that whole fight or flight syndrome a lot. It's not as reactive. Now, is there any type of therapy where you use a conjunction of, let's say, EMDR and psychedelics, or would you go like one psychedelic and then maybe do EMDR, or how would you work with that?
Well, I think you have as many answers as people there. I think of psychedelics it's just part of the toolbox.
Yeah.
And EMDR is part of the toolbox, or as other therapies that are also somatic therapies like tapping, EFT, or there's all sorts of body talk stuff. Lots of different therapies that we do know that we store emotion in the body. Right. You talk to any registered massage therapist and ask them what it's like to massage people, and when they cry and what memories are coming up when they start working on different parts of the body or start doing some myofascial release work. So I think what it is you use anything you can to take you to the next level, and then you make that next level your new normal, and then add more in and take it to the next level. And so EMDR might get you to the place where the anxieties come down just enough that you feel comfortable going and having like a ketamine assisted therapy, or if you're in another country where these other medicines are legal, psilocybin or ibogaine or whatever. So I think there's no right answer. It's like, what is the next step, best step for you as an individual? What is the next step for that person as an individual? And there's a million ways to do it. There's no right way. You know, we often say this is the way, and we say that because that's what we're best at. But that's not the way. There's a million ways, and so they're all on the table. And I think it becomes a really nice collaborative conversation between people and the healthcare people in their life that are there to assist them to make the best decision for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And, you know, be honest with you, you know, it's so refreshing to hear this from a medical doctor, because over the years I've had conversations with medical doctors, and it always seems to be very rigid and one-sided, one-dimensional in the thinking. And it's so refreshing to hear a medical doctor talk about EMDR, body work, and emotions and things like that, and trauma, and, you know, the internal trauma that we face all the time, even though there's external trauma, like, you know, getting in a car accident, but there's also the psychological, emotional, and even say spiritual trauma that can be existed with that too as well.
Yeah.
When you guys do your research,
before you go on to the question, I just want to bring this back to something that I think this is really important. Like, doctors and nurses and healthcare providers we're just normal people, right? That's it. And there's been this rift, I think, in the way medicine has happened. Like, we were very holistic. Like, physicians would compound herbs and stuff, and we moved into more of this pharmaceutical medical model, which made a big difference, you know, in a lot of people's lives. Like, we got stuff that we didn't have before, like antibiotics, like not a bad thing, right? And you know, it can be all full circle. Like, we get taught a certain way, and that's starting to change. So when people go into medicine or any healthcare or any healing arts, they're going into it because they want to help people. And physicians are exactly the same. And sometimes, like, what happens, we get churned through the machine too, and we come out the other side. And I would really invite people to lean in on this and say, look, let's lend hands across, and let's rebuild the container of healing. You know, it's not like Western medicine versus traditional medicine. It's full circle. It's all included here. And so, you know, if your physician's not up to your standards where you wish they were in holistic care, you know, have some compassion for them, because we were churned through a system that spit us out, burnt out, tired, fatigued, massively in debt. And that's not why we went into it. We didn't go into it. We thought we'd have hours with every patient. We didn't know that the system would be saying, no, you got to see somebody every 10 minutes, run, you know. So, I mean, I'm just saying all that to say, like, we're humans, and we're finding our way home too. We're finding our way back to holistic care, and it's not the naturopaths versus the MDs versus the chiropractors. We're all on the same page. We're not maybe not all on the same page yet, but we're getting there. But we're on the same team. Wellness.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad you brought that up, and I really appreciate you bringing that up too as well, because there always seemed to be a rift like that. Because I do talk to a lot of naturopathic doctors, and some of them get on their high horse, and it's like, okay, and I get it. And then I have some other ones, they say, yeah, it's an integrative system, you know, like, you know, and they sing the praises of allopathic care. Like, I mean, it's a really very much a necessity when we can get that holistic thing. And I'm really excited when you talk about that. And it's, as a medical doctor yourself, seeing that holistic trend coming back. And that's what I get excited about. And I know a lot of my listeners are going to be going, yeah, thank God we can kind of see this. And this is what really needs to be out there, is this type of information, this integration of different things, and this different philosophy. Well, it's not really, I guess, a different philosophy. Maybe it's an old new philosophy that's coming back, which was old, but now is new, and is coming back. As, you know, this type of medicine has been around for, I don't say centuries, but even before, like, you know, the shamans and medicine men and medicine women of all indigenous tribes in different places. It's been around for a long time, but now just to bring this back into the mainstream and into everyday life. And I mean, the possibilities they think about, you can, you know, like my brain kind of sits there. I'm trying to rationalize and trying to articulate the best way I can say it's like how important it is that if somebody who's suffering so deeply from some type of trauma, any type of trauma, could take either a ketamine assisted therapy or a psilocybin or anything like that, with, you know, assisted with a physician or something like that, and they can actually change their lives where they can get back in society and be that living, breathing human awesomeness that they are. I mean, I just love hearing that shit, to be honest with you. I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and we're headed that way. And I think it's nice too, you can't deny that we've come from a certain place, and that we, have this time of, this rift sort of thing. But I think the thing that's really good at coming out of this is that a better way of looking at things in a way that can combine not only, the scientific inquiry, which we all have, we're all scientists, right? We're all constantly observing, and that's what science is. And then developing, good trials to figure out, is it true? Is it true what we think? Like, we think this helps this. Does it help? Let's find out, and let's do it well. And then let's find ways that we can study things even more complex. That's the challenge that we have with our clinical trial system in a pharma model, is that it's really easy to study a single molecule. It's hard to study a complex organism like a fungi, a whole mushroom with all of its thousands of constituents in it. And so it's kind of an exciting time, because I look forward to seeing how we can really move forward and go, how can we actually work together and study these whole things, these molecules, and find out what is the best for different people, and just accelerate that knowledge.
Yeah, I heard, I can't remember this quote, and hopefully I don't bastardize it, but they were talking about how to understand the mushroom, you have to let the mushroom teach you. And to understand the consciousness, because it's so vast and so intertwined. They're saying you just have to elevate your consciousness to a different level to understand the complexity of it, because it's so vast. And I always thought that was really, really interesting. It's like, that's kind of cool. Like, you have to expand your consciousness to understand the complexity of something that's so simple that grows in the earth. But there's so much more to it. I thought that was kind of deep, and I was like, wow, that was really interesting. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was what this end of life and using ketamine or psilocybin for that. I've never heard about that, especially into like a palliative care situation or something like that, where somebody's end of life. Or when I was researching, I was like, wow, that is pretty cool. Like, to ease the anxiety and fear of death. I was like, wow, that's a real thing. So how did you get involved? Was that through just your own training and just with your experience of seeing trauma, like as a firefighter?
It came up, well, like I said, NYU and Johns Hopkins did the preliminary stuff, and their outcomes are really, really good. 67% said it was one of the most meaningful episodes of their life, in the top 5, up there with the birth of a child or a marriage or something like that. It's like meaningful events. So when you start to look at that, that's really interesting. And we have this really great program, Roots to Thrive, that does ketamine assisted therapy. And we were approached to ask if we would do the psilocybin part. So in Canada, we have the Section 56 exemptions.
Okay, let's just talk about that really quick, because I had that written down too. Let's talk briefly what that is. So because I know I have a lot of listeners around the world, so if they don't understand, okay, what is she talking about? So can you just give it just a little
absolutely.
bit of...
Yeah, so things are a little bit changing right now, but generally at the time when we started it, it was, if you couldn't, patients could apply for access to a medicine or a therapy that wasn't otherwise available. So something that's not in clinical development. And so we had quite a few people in Canada have applied that had a palliative care end of life diagnosis and have some distress associated with it, like depression, anxiety, existential distress. And they could apply to the Canadian health minister under what's called a Section 56 exemption, and saying that basically they've tried everything else, they're not doing better, and they want access to psilocybin for their distress, for their depression or anxiety related to their palliative diagnosis.
That'd be associated with pain too as well?
Well, it could be. I mean, these were the first ones we got. Actually, brought kudos to actually Dr. Bruce Tobin. He was the one that started this for one of his patients. He put in an application to Health Canada, and it was essentially ignored for 5 years. And then finally, there was enough noise being made, and I believe it was more the lawyers that helped start rattling some things, and then they started granting them. And then a bunch more went in, and a lot of physicians across the country put in applications for their patients. And one of my patients got it just for depression. And so they had tried everything and still had depression. They had a successful underground session on psilocybin, felt much better, but still felt like they needed one more. And so they got their exemption. And so that's what the Section 56 exemption. It's at the what's the word I'm looking for? It's up to the health minister to say yes or no, basically a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And so the health minister at the time said yes. And so then we set up a mini program, a shorter version of the Roots to Thrive program. That's a 12-week program. And we made a 6-week program for these patients that were end of life. And yeah, it was beautiful. You know, they came together as a community online, got to know each other, and then they came together at a private facility with our team, our multidisciplinary team, and we held a traditional kind of Western ceremonial entwined with ceremonial values and ceremonial offerings. And they had their psilocybin session with the team there, with beautiful music, and then integration after. So trying to replicate, all of our roots of traditional ceremony of some sort, and just making it just Western enough to not have anyone lose their mind. Not of the group, I mean, of health authority people and
yes, of course. Yeah, because they always, the government likes to put their thumb on everything. So I was going to ask you, how do they rate the criteria for individuals? Is it like a lottery system? They just kind of, okay, this guy seems to, or this person seems to get it. It's like, is there any type of criteria, or is it just like it's like rolling the dice?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think they're really thoughtful on how they look at these at Health Canada. I think they're between a rock and a hard place, really, right? There's not a place there, really. And so they're trying to, do something with this, but also they have to stay within the lines. That's why we have Health Canada, right? Because pharmaceutical companies and people that are companies that have brought products to market have gone rogue and done bad things. We wouldn't have rules if there hadn't been somebody who had done something that was harmful. And so that's what happens with these rules. It's like, oh, okay, this drug came out, caused these birth defects. Now we got to make it so that there's never another drug that does that, right? And so then you stack on rules. And it really is for safety. Number one, Health Canada's job is safety, not to quash things. And it's a tough place. But I think they have, has the person tried other things that could have worked, and did they not work? Are they going to be well supported? Do they have a good medical or healthcare group around them that can help? And is it a thoughtful application?
Like, where do you see this happening in the next 5 years? Do you see it being more of a legal therapy in the next 5 years or so that it's coming out? Because obviously, I mean, they legalized, marijuana. And I mean, there's the research is so much research now on the use of CBD and THC for pain, and, the prescribing for cancer patients and things like that. So where do you see, this trend going for psychedelics?
I think we'll see a couple things. I think we'll see increasing decriminalization campaigns, which we're seeing all over the place. There's multiple states, multiple cities throughout the US and Canada. So I think we're seeing decrim, and that just brings it to the lowest law enforcement priority. So basically that the police can't use any resources to go after anyone that's using psychedelics or selling psychedelics unless they basically solved every other crime in the area first. So that makes it, that de facto takes it out of the legal sphere, which is good. It never should have been there. So I see that. I see the learning curve accelerating. I think more and more people are speaking up. I think I'm contacted at least 1 or 2 times a day by medical doctors that are like, I want to know more. What's going on? So it's accelerating. It's been in popular media. There's 78 clinical trials on psilocybin right now, thousands on ketamine. I think there's 18 registered for LSD, MDMA, and over 100 as well. And then there's some other ones, like there's iboga, ibogaine, mescaline, ayahuasca, of course, in South America, like hundreds of ayahuasca studies. And so I think we're gonna see a full circle. I think we're gonna see pharmaceuticalized Certainly, there's going to be psychedelics and pills. There's lots of companies trying to take the psychedelics out of the psychedelic, but give you the same result. Maybe your amygdala, like your calm down, your anxiety's down, your depression's down. So I think we're definitely going to see them in pills for sure. And I don't see that as a bad thing, because that's what some people want, right? Like some people, if you get diagnosed with diabetes, want the pill, and other people want to exercise. And it's nice to have both options, so it's nice to have. So we're going to see that prescriptions for sure. I think we're going to see really interesting science. I think we're going to see a real blossoming of science, looking at a whole bunch of indications, like things that you haven't even thought of, like neurodegenerative diseases like ALS, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, chronic pain syndromes, and of course, all the mood disorders, depression, PTSD, OCD, eating disorders, substance use disorders. So we'll see a lot of that. And I think what'll come of that is we'll start to see, maybe if you got opioid use disorder, that Ibogaine may be your go-to, or maybe we'll find out that something else is the go-to. So we'll see that sort of stuff. I think we'll see, I don't think it'll change for personal use. I think 99% of all psychedelics is done in the personal realm or underground. I don't think that's going to change, because it's just not going to change. It's so easy to get. That's one of the interesting things talking to Health Canada. It's like, it's so interesting having to come ask you to use something that everyone can get. It's not like a drug. It's not in the laboratory. It's available. So we'll see. I think probably more personal use, and hopefully some really good results for where medicine hasn't had a lot of good solutions. We may find some neuroplasticity, some neurogenesis. Wouldn't that be great? We're all getting older. Wouldn't it be nice? Like, I think especially around the microdosing data, using small doses of neuroplastic molecules like psilocybin and LSD, and probably many others, to help enhance cognition, or not go downhill at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's an infinite potential of different stuff. When you were talking about, ALS and, like even Alzheimer's and things like that, it's like, I mean, just the thought about how that could the preventative from the decline of that disease and different things, like, I mean, I was just like, oh, wow, that is like, it's almost baffling to think about how simple something like this is. It's always been around, that could change, like literally change people's lives in their directions, and take them on a whole nother path. Like, it's no longer a death sentence saying, okay, you're going to have ALS. Now, hey, no, we got you hooked up. We got this new drug, or we're going to do some psilocybin or something along that line. And all of a sudden, they're no longer having the ALS symptoms, and they're living a fruitful, loving life. Like, I mean, how could you not get behind this stuff?
Well, we hope we see some signals in that area. I think we're definitely going to see them with some things. I mean, case reports we've been collecting for quite a few years, almost 10 years of case reports, and remarkable recoveries on people. But again, it may be, there's always outliers, and so we have to be cognizant of that. And let's see. I mean, again, it talks about science, right? It's an exciting time for young students coming through. Like, look at it. Like, research is going to be fun. It is fun. Like, you get discovery. And we need this kind of discovery.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's interesting. The technology in our world is moving so fast, and it's always ever changing. But we seem to be lacking on a few other areas, and this is just one of them, that we seem to be behind the ball on a lot of things. And I think it's just not even just in health, but I think just in general consciousness in general. I think we're a little behind the ball. I mean, we got all these great, cool gadgets, but we're lagging on so many different things. And if this can be a springboard to help elevate us in so many ways, not only just physically, mentally, and again, holistically, spiritually, at the same time, as a community, as a society, as a country, as a world, I mean, I'm all for that. And I've always been a big fan of that, anything that help. And I think it's a perfect time in now to have this type of research right now. I think it's really, really important, especially in all the craziness that's happening. We need to kind of get behind ourselves and really, do healing on such a big level. And I think this plant medicine is one of the ways of doing it.
Well, it definitely makes people kinder. It's a time where we need that. I think most people are wonderful people. They're really kind and they mean well. And And it's an opportunity to get reconnected to ourselves, get off, ironically, get off the screens, get back into nature, and back into community. Get back into community, and let's put technology in its place where it assists us. It doesn't control us, or doesn't dominate our time. That we, and these medicines, that certainly psilocybin has shown that people that have had a session with psilocybin, or an opportunity to use psilocybin, are much more nature aware. They have much more respect for nature and what it provides to us. And so I think when you get reconnected with who you really are, you get back to your own essence, you get all the crap out of the way of not good enough, or I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm a failure, oh, I have such shame, all these things that just get piled on just from the human experience. As you remove that and you come out from underneath that, and you just have that wonderful breath of air, and you just connect with people and recognize we're all on a journey. We're all on this windy journey, and we're never done, and we're never going to get to the top of the mountain. We're just going to keep getting a little bit better and have some fun along the way.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, as well, are there certain things that you can't treat with psychedelics? One of the things, specifically like schizophrenia.
I think there's a lot of things you can't treat with psychedelics. Yeah. I'll put that out there. I don't think they're a panacea. I don't think they're going to solve everything at all. I want to be really clear on that. I think there's a place. We don't know the full spectrum of that place yet. We certainly have a nice taster, and it's positive. It's good. But that data needs to come out, because often those people are always excluded from trials. Right? There's all these exclusions when you register for a trial, or you register as a patient for a trial. You have to be really careful in clinical trials. You have to not do harm. And so one of the ways you don't do harm is you have to say, oh boy, yeah, this person's already had some episodes of psychosis. We don't want to send them over the edge. So then they can't come in the trial. Right? So it may be hard to get some of that data. And that's why these, like the microdose.me study that we have in process and is still going, and a new version is coming out in a few months. This is what we call a prospective observational trial. We're not telling people what to do. We're not providing anything, but we're watching what they do and seeing what the results are. And these kind of trials help do better clinical trials, because you can't, if somebody happens to be pregnant and they registered for the trial and they didn't know they were pregnant and they were microdosing and then they had no problems, that's helpful evidence. Right? And we often get evidence like that. We get case reports, or like, a child finds somebody's mushrooms mixed in with chocolate and eats them, and they do okay. It's those kind of things that help fill in some of the blanks. But I don't think they're the be all end all for everything. I don't think everyone should do them. I don't think people should be rushing out and going, I need to have a psychedelic experience, and I need to have one of every psychedelic experience. It's not a passport that you need to get stamped. I think it should be a meaningful experience. And if we're really talking about returning to, more community-based and ceremonial, then it should be a sacrament. You should have good setting. You should have preparation. You should have support. Make sure that it's a safe medicine for you to take with what, if you have any health challenges. And it should be really thoughtful. I would hope people are really, really thoughtful. I think you can do a lot of good, but with good preparation, and good preparation stops there being challenges.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because there's so many people who talk about it, and it's like, oh, it's not really the experience. I mean, it's not really it's more about the experience and saying that you did it than actually the kind of bigger picture of using it. It's like, oh, I did ayahuasca. I'm so much better. Oh, I did this. And it's not, like you said, it's not that whole idea of ceremony, but there's no integration too as well. Because I think that's really important. I had another doctor on, she's a psychologist, and she talked about, one of the things that she does is help people with that, is that integration is coming back. Okay, understanding what's happening and what are these crazy visions, what's happening with me. And it can really give you that grounding effect, because there are sometimes, from my understanding, that it could be quite traumatic in some ways, that because you see sometimes the darkness of your own self that may be a little more traumatizing, and you realize that your shadow, or whatever else you want to call it, is kind of being presented to you, and how to integrate that back after you had this experience, because it could be so magical and mystical. But if you have no idea to ground that information and ground that back into this reality, it can be very difficult.
Yeah, and it speaks to the sacredness in a way of these. And when I've talked to people that have been long in their indigenous traditions, especially people that work with wachuma and ayahuasca, it's quite common for them to in the integration phase to tell people, don't talk about this. This is your journey. This is your session. Don't go out there and tell all your friends about it. Hold it sacred. Bring the non-ordinary.
What do you mean? I can't post this on Instagram? What?
Why would anybody post anything on Instagram other than pictures of cats? I don't know. It's a personal something you've done. You've done something really meaningful for yourself. So spend the time with it in that sacredness and be with it. And if you are working with a therapist or a psychologist or somebody that is well schooled in these therapies, then you have a facilitator to help you navigate that. And that's really about, there's no bad trips, there's no bad sessions, there's only bad setting and integration. It's all about that container. And so, I think that's really important, that people are going to use these medicines, that they find a really skilled team that will wrap around them and help them navigate it. It can be, most people can do it very well, like their own inner healer will do quite well with it. But for those that have a lot of challenges, you want a really strong team. And this is one of the challenges I have with, people in the underground. Like there's a lot of really skilled people in the underground. Like I'm not dissing the underground, but if you just came back from, Peru and you were there for a couple of weeks, you're not a shaman. You don't even use that term. Like, don't use these healer terms. I'm not a healer. I don't heal anyone. People heal themselves. We just give options. We facilitate. Be very, very careful of people that self-label themselves as more than their lineages, or that they don't give attribution to their lineage of their training. You should be asking people, like, who did you train with? How long did you train with? What are your qualifications? If you think about how we would have even, 200 years ago, if I was in a lineage of people that were medicine people, I would be able to say, my grandmother taught this to my mother, who taught this to me, and I will teach this to my daughters. And, we've kind of become a little egocentric. And I hope that people will consider moving away from that and saying, acknowledging where they've gotten their knowledge and how they've got it and what their actual credentials are. And don't hang up a shingle after you just came back from ayahuasca. You can do damage, and people don't realize the damage they do. We've had a lot of people come into our program with PTSD because of doing psychedelic medicine with people who are unskilled.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to talk to you, because I know there's a lot of big fear around that, and it's rightly so. Again, like you talk about the ceremony aspect of it and the deep healing, but there's always that side of it that doesn't get talked about, because there is that kind of fear around that. And, you hear those horror stories, and I'm sure you've seen it firsthand. Like they're more worse off than they started because, somebody quote unquote said, hey, they did one trip and now all of a sudden they had this mystical experience and I'm a shaman now. And, that's one of the things I hate about the spiritual community. And, it's my podcast is partially about this, but I just find it just like this whole spiritual bypass bullshit is so dangerous and so scary. And they're just like the worst people to be around with. And that's my opinion on that. But yeah, you got to be really careful on that. Now,
well, and before you move on to that, like I think one of the things is always be solution-based. And, I'm a board member of the Canadian Psychedelic Association. And one of the things that we're really trying to do is say, okay, well, if this is going to happen, so let's give some guiding documents on that. So we have an ethics working group that are really trying to put some guiding documents together, where there's lots of groups all around North America and in Europe that have also done things. So we like to highlight, other groups that have done really good work. We're not trying to monopolize it. We don't want to. We love throwing kudos around to everyone who's doing great work, but bringing in guiding documents like how to find a really good ethical therapist. Right? We've got that on our site now, how to be a really good ethical therapist, because I think it's easier to help people rise up than I think it's more beneficial to help people rise up than to swing baseball bats and say you're doing it wrong. If you show people the way to being really good and say, look, if you're in the underground, this is coming above ground, you might as well start getting your credentials, get your counseling degree, get your therapy degree, get your somatic therapy degree or training, like add on some credentials. It's happening. So you might as well do all the things that you would want in a therapist. And so in the meantime, it's a lot of harm reduction. So look for guiding principles, ask questions. And if you don't feel right, like trust your spidey sense. If your intuition is saying this is not the person to work with, don't work with that person. This is not a sprint. There's a marathon here. Like the best thing you can do is really trust your intuition and you being the expert of you for your therapy. Ask around, check out references, ask for references, ask the hard questions. Don't take bad answers. Like if they say something, dig in, ask the next question. Like, what do you exactly mean by that?
Yeah, I think that's well information. That's well. Can you speak now? I mean, I think that's really important information to have that out there. Now, with the Canadian Psychedelic Association, do you guys recommend any like potential places that if you wanted to take an ayahuasca, ceremony and things like that, or do a special ceremony, or do you guys have a list of practitioners or places or centers that offer this in a very healthy and safe environment?
We don't do that at this point, and mostly because we don't feel that right now we don't have the resources to be able to stand behind that. If we're going to put a center on, we want to make sure that if somebody goes there, they're going to have the right experience that they need, that they're really well taken care of, and we don't have the resources to be able to put a stamp of approval on. But there's a lot of great other organizations out there, and there's a lot of sharing of way back in the day, like 20 years ago plus, when I first did ayahuasca, there was a great DOS website that basically had a list of the 5 centers in Peru, and with really good descriptions of what to expect and what the quality was, and you could read through them, and then you could make a good decision because people were sharing information. So again, it's buyer beware right now. I think there's some really high quality places that, obviously in the Netherlands and Jamaica, there's many coming up, quite a few in Mexico, Costa Rica. I think we'll see a lot more, and hopefully we'll see some really good ones in North America and Canada or US. And they're happening. They're happening. So they're happening everywhere right now. I get regular emails of all ceremonies happening on Vancouver Island all the time, and yet these are things that are not yet legal. So it's not hard to find.
Yeah, it definitely is. But it's always nice to find that it is a growing thing, and there are people behind it like yourself that making sure that it's a safe and a great experience for on all levels of healing, which is so important. I think it's so fascinating, and yeah, it's such a great thing. I think it's something that's long overdue, and I really appreciate you doing the work behind the scenes there to really bring this to the public and really educate people and educate myself about this too as well. And I know my listeners are going to be eating this up because they're on the same mind frame too as well. It's just about integrating wholeness and health, and just becoming a better conscious society out there. And it's amazing what we can do once we get to that stage of. And I'm pretty excited to see where we go. I just think it's such a fascinating topic, and just want to say thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And we've come a long ways. I want people to feel optimistic about the future. We have come so far. In a few years, we have, clinical trials have accelerated. Psychedelics are regularly mentioned in a respectful way in popular media. You see it on, I don't watch a lot of TV, but there's not too many shows that I see anymore that psychedelics aren't talked about at least once in the storyline. There's great conferences all over the world that are really integrating the grassroots. A Catalyst coming up in Kingston is going to have a lot of arts, culture, and science all mixed in, policy, business, everything. So it's happening. This is a good thing. And speak up and get involved and be informed and be friendly, be nice to each other. Everybody's doing the best they can. And I think respectful dialogue and actually acknowledging that, in these trying times, we've actually done pretty good as a species. So now let's be a better species and fit in a little bit better here with nature.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And that being said, Dr. Kryskow, I just got a question. So if people were trying to find your information, find research, they want to support any of the research or do anything like that, where can they find you?
Well, yeah. So easily at the Canadian Psychedelic Association, we're really working hard there to bring lots of these resources. We've been going strong for a number of years. We have an amazing volunteer base, a wonderful board, and really just trying to unite and connect everybody from coast to coast on the research. MAPS Canada, their reason to be is research and education. So they're a great place if you really want to help with research. We're doing a lot of collaborative efforts with them. Our program, Roots to Thrive, is a nonprofit and is connected to the university. The research portion of our program is connected as a charitable with Vancouver Island University. And there's a lot. I think what I hope to do on the Canadian Psychedelic Association website very soon is we want to really start highlighting a lot of these projects and let people help crowdsource and fund some of the research or fund some of the projects. Healing centers, and there's so many opportunities. There's no lack of opportunities. So I think people can find the information, and certainly they can find me and find a lot of the information at the CPA website or on the Roots to Thrive website or LinkedIn. I think that's about the only social media that's public for me. So.
Okay, so just I think you sent me all that information anyways. I asked for it, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'll make sure that it's in description like I always do. It's like all my guests. I always want to promote, my guest and what they do and all the wonderful stuff. So if you're listening to the podcast, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, stuff like that, just scroll down in the description. I know it's a little hard sometimes. Just scroll down a little bit further. And if you're watching the video too as well, it's always in the description below. So underneath all the information about the episode, there's always the information about my guests and stuff like that. So I'll have all that information. So if you want to check everything out there, want to get some more information about psychedelics and all the great work that you and your fellow researchers are doing, that would be fantastic. And that being said, Dr. Kryskow, I'm just going to close off the podcast here. So this has been the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.